everyone, Stephanie Sterling here, and before anybody asks, freelance money. Okay? I had someone on Facebook the other day saying, your patrons pay you to destroy the AAA industry, that's what they're funding. I don't know how to tell you this, but even though I resemble one, I'm not a god. I can't actually destroy an entire industry. No, I don't spend patron money on the pinball tables, because that's what they accused me of. I don't even think they were a patron. No, all of the money goes towards keeping miniature fantasy Willem Dafoe fed. He needs noodles. And skin. Anyway, today's Jimquisition is a little bit of a journalistic one, let's say. I've been talking with people in the game industry about jobs because layoffs have been a big part of the news and, well, it may be a lot worse than we're seeing, even though it looks really bad. So try to enjoy. You know, we've tried to make it fun, about as fun as such a topic can be. Yeah. Remember when Satoru Iwata famously claimed that Nintendo doesn't lay off its employees when things get tough? Me and a few thousand other folks who worked at Nintendo of America's Redmond campus mentally responded to that with, of course not. You just purge associates. So goes one testimony regarding the state of job security in the video game industry, or rather the lack thereof. Recent weeks have seen a deluge of stories regarding layoffs within the game's business as well as the wider tech sector, and it is, to put it in highly professional terms, fucking atrocious. Often the result of aggressive expansion in which large companies devour smaller companies and hundreds of people are hired to manage growing business interests, so layoffs tend to occur when that growth is over and the people who thought they had careers, including those who may have relocated across countries to take the job, are no longer needed and jettisoned like shitty little bits of paper from a confetti cannon. As we've regularly criticised on this show, layoffs can also be attributed to a corporation's need to perpetuate the myth of endless growth, making job cuts simply to save money and create the illusion that they're still growing once their ability to make actual revenue hits a cap. It's been happening a lot lately, and the amount of people being turfed out into a merciless and cruel job market should be, quite frankly, shocking to anybody who has a heart and a sense of justice, which unfortunately rules out the video game executives turned executioners. The most headline-grabbing situation has been the layoffs at Epic, including a reported decimation of the team behind Fall Guys, but that's just a fraction of the damage being done to people's futures. Layoffs at CD Projekt Red are so egregious, 3 rounds of them in 3 months, that employees have moved to start a union about it. Sadly, that might not be enough to help them, considering BioWare just laid off the entire QA department after they unionised, which is just fucking scumbag behaviour.
No, it's not scumbag behaviour, it's BioWare magic!
Telltale, Team 17, and of course the big Microsoft redundancies earlier this year, it's just not stopped. And it's all happening at the same time, like it's some sort of horrible, cynical business plan. But today we're not here to talk about layoffs. Well, not the ones you can see, anyway. There's more than one way to skin a cat, or indeed get rid of workers when you've decided they've outlived their usefulness, and you need to tell your investors that you're still making more money than you did the year before. I've been gathering statements from people at different studios and publishers that paint a pretty damning picture of how video game companies, and indeed many companies in general, engage in mass job cuts even as they claim they're not laying anybody off. Some of it'll be familiar to anybody who's worked in a corporate environment, but whether you're aware of it or not, it's fucking ghastly, and it needs calling out. The most common and obvious issue with jobs in the industry is that video game companies love to hire employees that aren't employees, essentially gathering full-time workers but keeping them on contracts that say they aren't, having their cake and fucking it too by getting all the labour of a proper employee without having to offer any of the benefits, guarantees and pay of one. The most famous company to publicly do this is World Wrestling Entertainment, and if you know anything about its former chairman, Vincent Kennedy McMahon, a corrupt incest obsessive who I'm legally not allowed to call a sex offender because he's not legally, he's not.
Technically correct. The best kind of correct.
You can't be surprised by any of the audacious bullshit he tries to pull off. You see, none of the wrestlers in WWE are employees. They are all technically freelance contractors. Now, they're not allowed to work anywhere else, have no control over their public personas. Their entire brand, their name is owned by WWE, but, you know, they're not employees, so they don't get health insurance. It's amazing how much of somebody's life you can get for so very little when you make them sign a contract as a naive 20-something. We hear a lot about outsourcing in the game industry, and it's easy to assume that the term means exterior freelance workers who are explicitly paid for a one-time gig or otherwise hired on the understanding that their work is temporary. This term, outsourcing, has unfortunately been muddied to the point of resembling absolute fucking horseshit at times, especially when contractors are brought on with the implicit or even explicit promise of full-time employment that never materializes and was never going to. This little habit of, let's say, outsourcing for the interior is pretty popular in the game industry. I was lured with the carrot of, you might be turned full-time if you're good enough, explains a former contractor for the now defunct Zipper Interactive. Do you remember them? They did Unit 13. Do you remember Unit 13? No? No, just me then, yeah? They told me Zipper had both contracted and full-time QA testers, and the full-timers, typically those in senior positions, were the minority. There was lots of talk of, yeah, we can't pay you as much, but if you prove your worth, we might be able to get you a full-time position with good benefits and pay, which, in retrospect, didn't seem to happen for anyone. The statement I got suggests that Zipper's higher-ups were more interested in keeping their position of power and stringing along the eager, oblivious and easily replaceable folks who were doing the actual day-to-day activities that allowed the game to be released, myself included. Returning to Nintendo of America, one source backs up claims we saw going around last year that workers who aren't full-time are relatively shunned and treated with far less care and dignity than the embedded staff. We were issued badges with green stripes on them so as to differentiate us from the red adorned, and for higher-ups gold adorned, badges of the actual Nintendo of America employees. After a 2-week training course, during which we already lost a few associates, we were assigned tiny cramped cubicles in a segregated room and told to do our best. Most employees, and even many veteran associates, generally avoided us. We'd later learn that we were specifically hired and trained so we'd be ready for high post-Christmas call volumes. The period of time between December 26th and February 28th is, as I would learn later, a gauntlet of sorts. The mass hiring of contracted workers and the letting go of them by simply ending or not renewing their contracts is, in practice, the same thing we see with layoffs, only with fewer legal protections for those let go and the ability for a company to boast that it never lays people off. It's an identical vehicle with different tyres, walking like a duck but quacking like a bull's ass. It's similar to how, say, Jigsaw never technically lies in the Saw films. He just talks with enough euphemistic bullshit and omits so many details that he misleads the fuck out of his victims. Leadership in the game industry basically runs off Jigsaw logic, which should give you a clue as to how lacking in humanity they fucking are. They're not human. They're Faustian bargainers who rely on the use of the exact words trope to obscure the truth.
I believe you said you'd like to see your lawyer go fuck yourself.
AAA studios outsource so much work now it would be trivial to hide layoffs by cutting contracts rather than laying off internal staff, explains one of my sources. Video game publishers enjoy stringing temp workers along and, like John fucking Kramer, lie by omission. I've been rewatching the Saw films again if you couldn't tell. Contractors trained by Nintendo, for example, are not told that they're being hired to run a gauntlet, after which time their contract will be, as Nintendo insistently labels it, completed. That term, completed, is yet more Jigsaw logic TM. They're not letting you go. They're not even ending your contract. You've completed it. Like you've finished a level and accomplished your goal. Given how many people have full-time employment dangled in front of them like a fucking carrot, I wouldn't say anybody has the goal of completing their job unless they're fucking retiring. And don't even get me started on forced retirement. Basically, be wary of any organisation in the game industry that boasts about having no layoffs. They're rare. There's another way in which companies get rid of their employees, and this is a far more sinister method that has often been used on a personal basis but is starting to see mass deployment to cut multiple jobs at once. This method we will simply call performance. And this is certainly one that you may have encountered in your own working life. Performance is a vague enough term that managers have worked out doesn't need to be substantiated with reason, logic, stats, or facts. Basically, people lose their jobs because they're told that their performance isn't satisfactory, which, when you consider how this tactic is being cynically used to let go of workers, is just a fucking cruel thing to do. To effectively blame that person for your business decisions as their manager and make them feel really fucking shitty about it in the process. But that's what they do. They want to let someone go, they just say, performance. Your performance slipped. We're not happy with your performance. And there you have it. Instant grounds. Like the world's shittest coffee. Now, the skeptical among you may be wondering how exactly we can tell that performance-based job cuts aren't legitimate. It is a fair question, but ultimately it's the exact question these companies are relying on because, in all honesty, you can't tell what's a legitimate case and what isn't. Not when it's kept this vague. And it's that way by design. And it's what people in the game industry are learning when they're losing jobs for allegedly underperforming, but they've not been told how they're underperforming, and sometimes haven't even been told that they were being graded according to some nebulous quota in the first place. You know what? Sometimes a person isn't doing well at their job, but it is alarming how many people have noticed these shady performance-based job cuts. And when it comes to video game corporations, I never attribute coincidence to a situation where malice is an option.
Oh, did I do that? Oopsie!
Interestingly, some game companies combine the temp tactic with the performance one. Failing probation is what one studio called it when they wanted to let somebody go. Classy. At any rate, I've spoken to enough people both within and without the video game industry to learn just how common the performance thing is. In fact, it's something you see a lot reported by the queer community. A few weeks ago, I talked about how Bethesda and ZeniMax mistreated a trans employee, Leona Farron, outing her to co-workers and making it harder and harder to do her job by blocking credentials, isolating her from colleagues, and generally making the job stressful to the point she had to leave. And remember that last point, it's important. It's a story that'll be so familiar to trans people, it's just an expected part of coming out in the workplace. It's very common that you transition and suddenly you're told your performance is slipping, even though you've not changed a thing about the way you work. In my Bethesda video, I even highlighted this by showing how it happens to me, because while I don't have a boss, the perception of me in the gaming community as suddenly being ruder, angrier, and crazier was almost instant, as any glance at my comment sections can demonstrate. While it has historically disproportionately happened to marginalised people, getting rid of folks for obscurely defined performance-based reasons seems to be an increasingly common little ploy. Even worse, it's highly suspected that management engineer performance slips among their staff, contriving their own grounds for dismissal by deliberately setting them up to fail.
Game was rigged from the start.
We already know that crunch in the game industry is common, that coercing people into excessive overtime, overworking them to the point of stress-related injury, is a practice engaged in by multiple studios, often without shame. We also know that crunch doesn't actually work. At least according to research that suggests working your staff to the point of making them exhausted doesn't really increase productivity because, hey, how the fuck could it? It stands to reason that if you're making people skip out on sleep and meals, stuff humans need to be productive, you will get lower quality work produced less efficiently. Yet, the industry keeps crunching, despite research and basic fucking logic saying it doesn't work. Well, it might not work when it comes to developing video games better and faster, but it sure as shit comes in handy when you want to cut staff and have a whole crew of burned out stress cases you can accuse of underperforming. A load of companies are using performance as an excuse to lay people off outside of mass layoffs, claims one source, effectively waiting for people to burn themselves out and make one mistake so they can claim that it's actually their performance that got them fired and not the company wanting to kick people out. At my last company, random people were getting sacked weekly, and at one point they fired half the project management staff without notice and just said, we have smart people to pick up the slack. Once again, this is a technique that might be familiar to a lot of you whether you work in the game industry or not. Burning people out with crunch is one way of doing it, hamstringing employees by making their jobs harder, similar to what ZeniMax did with Leona, is another. Other times, a team will be faced with an impossible deadline, the consequences for failure being job cuts or some other form of financial punishment. Situations like this apparently happened at Zipper Interactive. Funnily enough, that last scheme is allegedly another favourite over at Bethesda. As anybody who remembers the tragic tale of Human Head will recall, the developers of the cancelled Prey 2, a studio Bethesda wanted to acquire, notoriously claimed it was set up to fail by the publisher's increasing demands for milestones and features that Human Head had no realistic time to develop on schedule. This was less about layoffs, but it was the same technique, said to be utilised in a bid to weaken the studio enough to buy. Bethesda has denied the allegations, but I'm not sure I believe a company that gave Obsidian a year to make Fallout New Vegas then withheld money based on Metacritic performance, or tried to hold an employee's medical care hostage to stop her suing them for misconduct. Why is it controversial to say that Bethesda is fucking filth? It is. Sometimes, of course, you don't even need to fire or lay someone off when you've destroyed them and their ability to do their job. Making the work so hard or stressful that someone just ups and quits, jumps before they're pushed, is a common scam as old as dirt. There's a legal term for it in the UK, constructive dismissal. I know a little about this, I've been there. I've been in predicaments where I felt I couldn't do my job due to the limitations imposed on me and quit just before the layoffs inevitably occurred. It's for that and many other reasons I'm glad Defy Media bit the fucking dirt. Bunch of media ravaging, cynically motivated, fashion-appeasing, bloody Companies still indulge in layoffs because, well, you can't hide the loss of 800 jobs at once, I suppose. Even sicker, the announcements of layoffs can actually be good for investors, as share prices can raise as a direct result, which is just some next level of fucking ghoulishness. Nevertheless, I am possessed of the belief, as are those I've spoken to, that the layoffs we're seeing in the public eye are not entirely reflective of the number of jobs being cut for the same motivations. Whether they're contractors being told they completed their job or failed probation, a team member being overworked to the point of quitting, or someone jettisoned under the flimsy pretext of performance considerations. The game industry, as well as the business world at large, is not short of duplicitous little methods used to decimate the workforce on a whim. I was about to pass Reggie Fils-Aimé in the common cubicle area between the CS department and the old cafe. I did the courteous half-smile nod thing right before we passed. He glanced at me and snarled like I had 3 heads and a hard-on.
What's wrong with you?
That final quote has no direct relevance to today's topic. I just really like it.
Put me inside the machine. I want to be hit with balls. And I need more skin.
Oh, miniature fantasy Willem Dafoe. Your foot's backwards. Anyway, that was today's episode of the Jimquisition. There are more stories that I will be looking into, especially the Nintendo stuff, because, well, in Nintendo of America, things aren't brilliant. But then what could you expect if Reggie Fils-Aimé was walking around snarling at temps as if they had 3 heads and a hard-on? I still really love that quote. Anyway, thank you all for watching, as per. Oh, thank God for me!